Unless, because it's an ecumenical court. I mean, I rather imagine no Catholics will join us. We're certainly open to that, but I can't imagine their hierarchy approving it because they already have orders and they already have a structure for that. So on some level or another, this is interesting in the sense that it's Protestants coming together trying to do something that's usually on the more Catholic Orthodox way of worshiping and being committed to Christ. So that's an interesting aspect of it all.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little confused on why they need to seek permission from an order where they're outsiders anyways. Do you think they're going to get kicked out of the order if they do this? I would hope that the order would not just give permission, but support their clergy in an endeavor into which they're buying in.
Don't confuse the order with the denomination of origin.
Yeah.
I think you might be.
Right.
They're saying if you're a Presbyterian and you're under vows, and correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm a Presbyterian because it was foreordained.
Mm-hmm.
And I decide that I want to join the order. I have to go to my superiors and get permission to join the order. Yeah, I would think at least in part so that the order doesn't become this axis, this place where this axe starts being ground, where in our language, the bishop then finds out that the Presbyterian pastor went and joined this order without permission, and the stuff starts to hit the fan.
Right.
And
because the idea is reconciliation, not division, right? So on some level or another, the idea of we don't want people coming to the order in order to escape necessarily their denomination. If they decide they want to leave their denomination and join another or something like that, that's a different story. But as long as they're a ordained member of that denomination, then we want there to be some sense of acknowledgement of that.
Yeah. No, I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah.
I would, looking at it more from a progressive point of view, that if I am supporting you in an endeavor that's in many respects going to facilitate the development of this denomination, that I also want to be able to do that in materialistic ways too.
Right.
Even if it's only $100 a year or something,
Yeah.
Well,
certainly we will accept donations for the order. We will accept any donations that anyone wants to provide for us. But as I said, so at this point, and it may change, this may change as time goes on, but at this point, all the clergy members of the order are not receiving any financial support from their denomination for their work.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't even say that. I would just say it's a donation being made by the denomination to support this particular endeavor, as opposed to.
Well, yeah, we would certainly welcome that.
Well,
but we're not in a position at this point.
One needs to know to go, so we ask.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. So now the structure is out of the house of the order, out of that intentional community, which will have some members of the order and some clergy in each house. There will also be an oratory that comes out of that. Currently, for us in Chicago, it's the oratory of Jesus Christ Reconciler, which used to be the Church of Jesus Christ Reconciler. We have a group of about 8 solid people who come regularly, and then there are other people, but it's just sort of, it's a pretty tight community though, and I want to get into that. So what happened was, before we had to we had been renting both the parsonage and a chapel from a Lutheran church, and the community lived in the parsonage, and the church was run out of the chapel. And so a year before, because of political reasons and some financial reasons, The order was already in the process of being formed, and we hadn't taken vows yet, but there were, we had written the rule and we had had several conversations. We were in the process of just, discernment around it and that kind of thing. So members of the community of Holy Trinity that were going to become, take vows for the order, decided that this year we were going to do the Eastern Orthodox fast, which is essentially vegan and no oil. So severely limited food, but not, but still meals during the day. It's not like a complete fast. But for the entire 40 days of Lent. But we also made an offer to our congregation to sort of say, is this something you'd be interested in participating in? Would you fast as well? This is an ancient tradition. We talked about, well, let me talk about that right now. Part of what we do, it's really fascinating because unlike some people who sort of deal with a lot of ex-Catholics, almost all our congregation are ex-evangelicals who find themselves attracted to a more kind of Catholic style of worship. In fact, there was one member of the oratory who the main reason she comes is because here was a place where she found where she could have the Mass and to come to and have a Mass worship without any of the other kind of crap that you normally have to deal with. But also, but that was not something that she desired before she started coming. She started coming around out of curiosity, and eventually she became to really rely on the kind of worship that we do. She really found something there. And I think one of the reasons I think that kind of thing works for us is we really do a lot of emphasis, Larry and I do a lot of emphasis on bodily worship, on actually sort of engaged worship, where, we do a lot of the formality of it, but, crossing yourselves and bowing and passing the Eucharist around everybody. Everybody gives everybody else communion. But we also emphasize that. We put a lot of, we talk about body worship. We talk about singing as embodied worship. We kind of get people to sort of engage in all five senses in worship in ways that a lot of the evangelicals that come around just that never had anything like that, any kind of experience like that.
It's that rod.
So basically everybody said, sure, what we proposed was that once a week each person would host in their house one meal. And they would cook that meal according to the restrictions of the fast. Now we weren't asking them to fast through all 40 days of Lent like the members of the order were, or the future members of the order were. But each week throughout Lent, one member of the oratory cooked a meal for everybody else. And everybody, it's like one of these things where they cook the main dish and everybody makes a side dish and that kind of thing. That's all, and everybody cooks according to the fast. But in that process, in sort of finding some way to try and engage everybody in a communal reflection on that, rather than each individual person deciding what they want to do like that, a real community formed in ways that wouldn't have otherwise. So that when the time came that we had to leave the Lutheran Church and we found the house of the order basically in this 3-bedroom apartment where just enough room for us, and we had to basically start worshiping in each person's home. So that's currently what we're doing right now. It's basically a rotating home church. Each person, not each person, some people do and some people don't, but actually I think almost everyone from the core group at one point or another has hosted a worship service in their home. But we'd already kind of established that sense of we all knew at each other's home. We were all on some level or another comfortable in each other's homes because of these meals in Lent. So we'd kind of said, we had sort of built a community so that when it came time where we really had to rely on the community to continue to worship, it was already there. Now, the house is, the hospitality aspect of it is really an important piece of it. We did an interesting study, basically where Larry and I just talked to everybody individually one-on-one about, you know, with the idea of growing the oratory, the membership of the oratory, like what attracted you, what do you think would attract others, where would you come, you know, and almost everybody said, because everybody remembered the larger house where there was a lot more hospitality available to us at the time. Everybody basically said, well, you know, we just got interested in the community and what you were doing in the community, and they kind of came around and you know, saw everybody working together, and we would have, I mean, part of the hospitality aspect is like there would be things like Shakespeare readings, you know, and people would come around and like gather together, and you know, there was one person who was just really into Shakespeare, and they wanted to like gather their friends together and have each person read a part from a Shakespeare play, and then other people would kind of come in and be like, oh, that's really interesting, that's really cool, what are you doing? And eventually, actually, a Shakespeare company formed out of that, and there's now an accidental Shakespeare company that formed out of the community. But everybody, you know, and we have other kinds of things as well, but like often meals and parties and whatnot. And people said, almost everybody said that they thought the way to get their friend to to interest their friends in the oratory was to interest the friends, was to sort of invite them over to the community and meet everybody and get a sense of who we were and how we weren't your grandmother's Christianity, right? You know, and so on some level or another, that has become kind of a focus right now of our particular house of the order. Is we need to find, we're hoping to find space. Right, I mean, on some level or another, at this point, the only way we could put anybody up is put them up on the couch in the living room, which is not even a good situation. But we're looking for a building. We have this idea of maybe getting a 3-flat with so some rentals coming in, and then as we are able to sort of build the community, we'll move people in as leases are up. And so we will have a larger space, a larger house, a larger community. We also want more than one unit because we have cats, and there have been people who haven't joined the community because they were allergic to cats. Like that became a barrier. But if we have like 2 different floors, we could accommodate them. You know, and so you know, right now we are in the process of working with, or we're looking into properties that we want to present to this foundation for starting. Intentional communities. I mean, we already have an intentional community, it's already started, but there are people who are willing to put up money to help more intentional communities happen because they believe in that, basically, that communal structure. And so we're sort of in that process. We're thinking about fundraising. We really haven't started talking a lot about fundraising, but you know. We haven't been doing. I mean, isn't that a lot of what, you know? It's such a barrier within, you know, the helping professions in particular. You know,
that's why I think sometimes commodity-based fundraising. You know, so like, and I've learned a lot from Milwaukee Metropolitan Voices on this. It's hard to say, give me $20.
Right.
But it's easier to say, hey, if you go to dinner over here and give them this coupon, we get a percentage of it.
Right.
And then it doesn't, and then maybe if we do that enough, we can get bold enough to say, just give me the $20.
Right. But it also just, I think in general, points out the importance of the hospitality, that people have come to worship us because we've already just offered them hospitality without any strings attached. Come over to a party, come read Shakespeare, come have a meal. Whatever, or whatever, you know, I mean, watch a movie, whatever, you know, it's that reaching out to people without, because our agenda is not to get everyone who comes into the house to join the order, or to like come worship with us. That's really not. I mean, we really don't. But what was interesting is that was the impression of the people who already come were saying, well, that's how you would attract more people. And it's true, that's how they were attracted to the place. And so, again, it's just, it's great when people, but we have to have that space. We have to have that space of hospitality in order for that to happen. Currently, we don't. We're just, and we're back to a bare bones in a tiny little apartment all the way on the west side. Most everybody in the oratory is on the east side, and so that's not currently happening really. So the other members of the order are in Detroit. Well, I was in Detroit the first weekend of this month. And I swear, I have never seen more burnt out buildings in my life.
Is that picture from the Chamber of Commerce?
Yeah, right.
It's an open household.
Oh no, but seriously, that was my impression of Detroit. I mean, that's what I saw all over.
Fix a rubber.
So how much did I buy the house for?
Yeah, right.
You could
So
make 3 levels out of
that's too much of a fixer-upper.
The gallons do the work.
So we have 2 members of the order in Detroit. We have Chris Hooten and his wife Elaine Hooten. They're both Assembly of God pastors. Now what's interesting about, they're recently in Detroit. They were in like, not Three Rivers, but some other town in the state. Yeah.
Twitters?
Some of the places in Michigan, some on the same coast, but just not in Detroit itself. That's what they were. That's what they were originally going to do their church plant, but that fell through. And then they were sort of, in an economic situation where Chris had to find work, and he got a job offer in Detroit. But what was interesting is like they came to us collectively as the order, trying to say, we're trying to discern if we should go to Detroit. Is that where we're called to go? It's where we might. It's the economically expedient thing, but is that what we really want to do? And basically, of course, we didn't know the answer, but our belief was that if there's no reason that we can see not to do the economically expedient thing and find out what work of the order you might want to do when you're there, and sort of discover that as you get there. So again, Chris is a coffee roaster and brewer. The esoteric level of his coffee knowledge is just beyond me. Yeah, he's like, he's also a steampunk. You can't quite say that everybody. He has a little bit of that kind of thing. And this is actually a picture from a news article on Catholic on Leche, which is in a neighborhood in Detroit where there are a lot of families. There are a lot of people who are trying to establish a neighborhood in there, and you can see that there's a sense of hope there that I didn't see in other places in the city. And what's also interesting, though, is that in many ways, Chris has become pastor to other pastors in his role as, because a lot of people who are trying to do church plants or there's a couple people doing church plants. There's one person who's a chaplain for a homeless shelter. There's another person who's kind of doing art therapy work and that kind of thing. And they all hang out in this coffee shop where Chris essentially, gives them more than coffee, right? And in fact, we basically had a meeting when the order met there. We all met all those people that he was sort of connected to, and we had this really interesting conversation about Detroit and what's going on in Detroit and how they see, where do they see hope and where, what is their work that they're doing and that kind of thing. It was really, really fascinating and cool. And of course, part of us going down there, the other members of the order going down there and observing this, was to help Chris to really understand in part what his role there was. Like you are a pastor to these other pastors, and he didn't quite think of it that way, but because we kind of came down and witnessed it and talked with him and had discernment conversations, we were able to help him understand this is actually what you're doing. This is your reconciling work right now. They ideally want us to form a house, but they haven't done that yet. Again, they're also in a teeny tiny apartment. That's Elaine. Well, you can see Chris in that picture as well. That's the whole family who's like 2 kids and Elaine's mom. She just finished school as a Master of Communication Ministries. She's currently working as a secretary in where it is. Holy Cross Children's Services in Detroit. And she was just talking about the ways in which she's trying to make that office, which is, you know, a lot of burnt out people working in that office, and she's trying to, the subtle ways in which she's trying to sort of improve the overall, you know, and there was this one person she talked about, like, relentlessly loving. She was just relentlessly loving this person because they were just not, you know, they were just so in a dark place. And I just love that, relentlessly loving. I love that idea as a ministry, you know. that idea alone as a ministry is something I think that's really wonderful. So it's, again, just sort of, that's her current work, right? You know, that's part of what we talk about. It's like, what are you doing now? Let's not talk about what you want to do and you haven't been able to achieve, but let's talk about what you're doing now and how we can build on that.
How long have they been in Detroit? Relatively short.
Yeah, not even a year, I don't think.
I'll give you a name.
All right, cool.
Name dropper.
And so,
I didn't say it out loud. That would be dropped.
the last thing I want to talk about is the parable of the Good Samaritan as it's presented in Eastern Orthodox icons as an allegory. And Larry, again, who's the icon painter, or icon writer, brought this meditation to us, and sort of, we started our annual gathering weekend with a meditation on this, but it was sort of, so the idea being allegorically that the man going from Jerusalem to Jericho, who gets set upon by diabolic powers, oftentimes they're presented as demons, although we didn't have that in the icon we were looking at. Represents wounded humanity, fallen humanity, if you will, but wounded, I think, is more accurate. And the image of the Good, like Jesus Christ is represented as the Good Samaritan. And what's interesting and significant about that representation is that who is the Samaritan? The Samaritan was an outcast, an outsider, a heretic. And so it is in that role of outsider and outcast and heretic that Jesus is put in this allegory. And so that was really something that, especially as I mentioned, you know, each of us are kind of in some layer, less me, honestly, it's less my case than it is for everybody else, but everybody else is sort of on the outside and the fringes of their denomination. They're not quite seen as, it's not that they're not seen as legit, it's just they're not doing what is expected of them. They're outsiders in some way or another. They don't necessarily agree with everything, you know, that kind of thing. Fortunately here, I can disagree with all you and still be...
We still love you.
I'd still be welcome. So that was sort of an aspect. Then the inn is depicted as the church, and oftentimes the innkeeper is Peter. Like Jesus is entrusting wounded humanity to the church. And again, and the two denarii are often said to represent scripture and tradition. And that's how the allegory plays out in the Eastern Orthodox Church. And one of the things that Larry was talking about is like we are all of these, right? We play all of these roles. We play the role of the outsider and the outcast, and to some degree the heretic, according to some, you know, some of the restrictions of the denominations that we participate in. We're also the wounded human, And we're also trying to do church in some way. And we're trying to, care for the souls of the other wounded humans as well as ourselves. I mean, that's part of the charism, or part of the rule of the order is the admission that we ourselves need reconciliation. That's partly why we're participating in God's work of reconciliation rather than saying, well, we're all fine, so we can reconcile with others. And so, no, we need it as well. Because there's a genuine estrangement and division and animosity that we all deal with and we all face in one way or another. And so, in participating in reconciling work, we are also aware of our own need for reconciliation. And so we are all members, on some level, probably even the demonic powers, but Larry didn't mention that. That's my little addition, there's that in all of us too. But
best that people come to that on their own.
Yes, exactly. But I just found this a very kind of profound way to start our reflection on that weekend of our annual get-together, sort of like where and how do we play out all these roles, and just be conscious of it and aware of the sort of dimensional aspects of what we're trying to do. That's what
Jubi, I like the icon. Where did you get it?
I just Googled it online. The allegory of the Great Samaritan. That's actually a slightly different one than the one Larry used, but the one Larry used was like less in focus, and I wanted one clear picture.
It's always good.